Christ's love compels us. Now, you don't really need that series title, but I want you to know that for the next 4 weeks, that's what we're talking about. That as the Christ follower, that Christ's love compels us. And so, for the Christ follower, the love of Christ should drive the way that we live. It should really determine everything that we do. It really should be the standard we use to determine how we treat others and even ourselves. If we allow Christ's love to compel us or to drive us, then we will almost assuredly end up ministering to people and in places outside of our normal comfort zones. So I want you to hear that right up front. If we're really going to allow Christ's love to compel us, I will almost guarantee you that you will end up having to minister to someone outside of your comfort zone. Let's start this morning with our scripture. If you have your Bibles, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18. I do have it on the screen for you this morning. I don't always do that for you, because sometimes I want you to look it up. But I have it this morning, the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18, verses 35 to 43. Now, my Bible has the nice little subtitle here, A Blind Beggar Receives His Sight, and so it tells you what it's all about just as you're ready to read. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. When he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. They told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. He called out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, I want to see, he replied. Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. When all the people saw it, they also praised God. I have 3 points for you this morning. I like to do that. They're not always as clear as they are today. But our first point is that Christ's love reaches wide. Christ's love reaches wide. I really want you to catch this. As Jesus was approaching Jericho, a crowd was gathered around him, almost traveling with him. And a blind man who was sitting along the roadside begging heard the commotion of the crowd passing by. You know what that tells me? This was a noisy group. This was not quiet as it was going by, because we have this man seated where he is begging. Now, he is begging to earn his income. And so just out of curiosity, do you think he's going to pick a real quiet street with no traffic or a real busy street with lots of traffic? Busy street, where hopefully he can earn enough money to survive. And here we have a crowd passing by. How noisy must this crowd have been? Pretty noisy, right? This was a noisy group of people that they're going by, so much so that the man, as he's sitting there, he says, what is happening? And as he's filled in, he's told that Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. The man immediately begins to cry out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. How many of you like to make a loud noise so that people really hear you and solely focus on you? Mine does. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. I was thinking about this. I had CPR training Friday. And one of the first things that you're supposed to do, after you make sure it's safe, is you yell out for help to see if anyone's around you. I'm going to tell you, myself included, those were some of the weakest cries for help that have ever existed, because we don't really want to be heard. We don't want anybody to really hear us. So imagine this busy street, a crowd of people around Jesus making lots of noise, and this man cries out, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. This was not softly spoken. This was not a whisper. And I highly doubt that he only said it one time. He was yelling as loud as he could and repeating this phrase, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. It wasn't a whispered statement at all. It was loud. It was repeated. And how do we know that he was making a lot of noise? Because what did the other crowd around Jesus say? Be quiet. Maybe they weren't that nice. Maybe they used another phrase, or their standard to it, their equivalent to it. But they said, you are making a scene. As loud as this street is, with all of the people who are passing by, with the animals that are going by, with the crowd that's around Jesus, we hear you. Knock it off. Now, amazingly, when I tell my children to be quiet, they seem to scream louder. And I wonder if that's the effect that happened to this man. That the more the crowd told him to be quiet, the more they tried to condemn him for yelling out for help from Jesus, the louder he screamed, and finally, he gets Jesus' attention. Jesus does not just ignore him. He does not walk on by. He does not just say, oh, you know what? Here's a blind man, I'm going to heal him and keep going. He asks that the man be brought to him. After this man has made all of this noise to be heard, after he's used to being overlooked and passed by. We're having a good time out there. Wasn't sure what was happening at first there. He's used to being passed by, and I want you to think about this because I will guarantee that all of us have passed someone who is begging, right? Someone who is in need, someone who is standing probably on a street corner hoping and asking for money. Maybe they have the little cardboard sign. I'd love to say that every time that happens I have given money. I have not. Or that every time that has happened that I have given some sort of food item or something that they could use. I have not. Because there have been times when I did what I'm sure many others have done. My best to avoid eye contact. I don't know if that's ever happened to you or not. Pretending not to see the person. Clearly they saw me. Clearly they saw me not looking back at them. And I would imagine that this man, as he is used to begging, was very accustomed to people avoiding him. Pretending that he wasn't there, pretending that he didn't count, pretending that he didn't matter, pretending that just because he was blind, that they must also be blind and unable to see him. Imagine his surprise when one who is used to being ignored is requested by Jesus. Suddenly someone who has been kept in the dark, put off to the side, completely ignored, has been brought front and center in front of Jesus. Somebody that the crowd was content to push to the side, Jesus brought right to the center. Jesus makes time for this man just the way Jesus made time for the children, which incidentally is also in Luke chapter 18. He stops the crowd. He stops the commotion on the street. Everything that is going on seems to just fall to the wayside, and what we are left with is a conversation between a blind man and the Messiah. Very powerful moment. Jesus makes times for him. He stops, and he asks him a question. Now, I want you to think about this. Jesus heard the man above all the noise. Jesus was not too distracted to hear the man calling out. Jesus was not too busy to help this man. And when the man is brought in front of him, Jesus asks him a question. What is it that you want me to do? Do you ever think about that? Isn't that a little bit of a silly question on the part of Jesus? The man is blind. He's been begging. He calls out for Jesus to help him. And Jesus brings him over. And in the initial conversation, Jesus says, what is it that you want me to do? love this because it really shows how wide Christ's love is. It would have been much easier for Jesus to just keep going with the crowd and heal the man as he walked by. I have no doubt that Jesus could have done that. It would have been much easier for Jesus to just keep going. The crowd would not have been interrupted. Jesus could have kept teaching or preaching or whatever he was doing as he was walking, perhaps building relationships, and he could have just touched this man and kept on going. But Christ's love reaches wide, and so he stops. And he begins to have a conversation with this man. I want you to think about this. One of the things that we know about Christ's love as it reaches so wide comes from the Gospel of John chapter 3, verses 16 and 17, if you have it in there. We read that, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." That sounds like a verse we all know, right? We have heard that. We have said that many times. How about verse 17? "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." It starts to give us this picture between Christ's actions and the verses that we read of how Christ really interacted and connected with people. It is one thing to say, "I love people." It is another thing to actually do it. It is easy to say, "I love to help people," and then to drive by the person who is begging for help. And I share that. Please understand that I'm not preaching at anyone because I have done this. It is easy to say we love and then to keep going. But for the Christ follower, if we say that we love wide, then it should really impact how we treat people. And so we get this impact from this great picture from Jesus that in the middle of being so busy, in the middle of having everything going on, he stops it all and he brings the man right to him. It takes us to our second point. They are there together. They're beginning this conversation. And what I see is that Christ's love is personal. I'm convinced that this is the reason that Jesus did not just say, "You are healed," and keep going. Oh, obviously you're blind. You want to see. So I'm just going to heal you and I'm going to continue on my way. That Christ's love is personal. Jesus asked that question, "What do you want me to do for you?" And I've thought about that question so many times over the years because to me, the answer is obvious. And I think to anyone in the crowd, that was an obvious answer. Well, duh, Jesus, he can't see. What are you thinking? Of course he wants to be able to see. But it's easy to make that quick assumption, what we think people need or what they want. Jesus reminds us that just because we think this is what they want doesn't mean it is. And the only way we're actually going to know that is if we get personal and talk to somebody. If we keep them at a distance, if we keep doing everything that we're doing, we're not going to know what they really need. Because what it looks like they need may not actually be the need that they are struggling with. Sometimes as we talk with people, especially emotional needs and spiritual needs, sometimes even financial needs are not always obvious on the surface. Are they? They're not always obvious on the surface. In fact, many of us have carried emotional and spiritual and financial burdens which our closest friends didn't even know because we did not want to tell them. So to look at someone and assume that we can tell exactly what they may need is ridiculous. We can't always decide what somebody else needs. And I love that as Jesus models this kind of love, he actually takes time to get personal with the man and to talk with him. There's another part of this. And it's not actually, it's like a sub-point here. We didn't actually make a slide for it. It is that Christ's love is not forced. It's not really point 3, that's like 2.5. That way I can fit my 3-point title and work really well. Christ's love is not forced. So often we have been well-meaning, and yet we have trampled over the person we have tried to help. Has that ever happened to you? You looked at them, you assumed you knew what they needed, and perhaps it was based on the way they were dressed or the situation that they were in. You just assumed, oh, you must need money, here you go. Now, by the way, I've never turned that down. You look at me and say, Pastor Jim, you look like you need money. That would be just fine. But that doesn't mean that that's the need that I have. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it simply forces on them what you think it is. It takes this personal connection, this personal relationship, to actually know where somebody is, what they are going through, and it is not forced on them. Imagine how different the story would be. In fact, I doubt it would even be told if Jesus was walking along the crowd. He notices the blind beggar. He hears the man calling out to him. He just says, "You're healed," and keeps on going. Now, I'm sure the man would be excited, but we would not have this amazing story to tell. And I think that the third point of this would probably not happen. Because Christ's love is personal. It is not forced. Do you realize it is possible that maybe that man in the moment wanted something different than to see? It is possible that maybe he wanted something different than to see. And so I love that Jesus actually takes the time to talk to him, to see what his need is, rather than just saying, "Here it is." One of the things that I try to be very careful with, that as I encourage you to help and to love others, is that we do not force love on anyone. I don't know if you've ever been in the place where people have forced something on you. It's not fun. And I don't appreciate it. Personally, I came home and I found a flyer in my door telling me how I needed Jesus. And I'm going to be honest with you, I took a little bit of offense to that. Not because I have everything figured out. Not because I'm always perfect and I never make mistakes. Not even because I'm a pastor. I took offense because you don't even know me. You have no idea where I am. And so I'm going to tell you that sometimes standing on the street corner, and this is why we do not do this and pass out church tracts, because we look at someone, we assume that because of their appearance that they obviously need Jesus, and we walk up and hand them a tract. I have a wonderful friend, a very close friend, who is a Methodist minister in West Virginia. He lived a very rough life before coming to Christ and is covered head to toe in tattoos. You take one look at this man, if he is not wearing, and he always wears a clergy shirt just for this reason, but if he's not wearing his clergy shirt, your first assumption would be, he does not know Jesus. In fact, for the longest time, he could not go to the mall without being given a tract and told, "You need to meet Jesus today. Because if you don't meet Jesus today, you're going to hell." Now, when this was happening, we were in school together studying for ministry. He got to the point that he no longer took offense to it. He just laughed. He's like, "Yeah, thanks, I'll add it to my collection." But we cannot just look at someone and assume we know what they need. We cannot just force something on them, no matter how well-meaning we are. I think we learn this very clearly from Christ. That he does not force love on anyone. That he does not just decide this is what you need. That he takes the time to develop a personal relationship and at least have that conversation and say, "What is it that you want me to do?" And so the man says, "I want to be able to see." Not one of us are surprised by that answer. That's the answer that we were all going with, right? Especially since we know the story, we've read the story, we've heard the story, we probably told the story to somebody else. We know the answer. He says, "I want to see." And so Jesus restores his sight. Most likely, The first face the man ever saw was the face of Jesus. Kind of gave me chills thinking about it. I was like, how cool is that? To not be able to see, and then the first face you see is not this person who just cast you to the side as you had been used to. Not the person who just decided what you would need, but the person who actually stopped, began to build a relationship, asked you what you needed, and then did it for you. It makes a whole lot more sense as to why the man then immediately followed Jesus as a disciple, doesn't it? Because that's the third part. That Christ's love changes us. Imagine how absurd this story would sound if after receiving sight from Christ, he went back and sat down and started begging. Wouldn't that sound weird? It would not fit. Wait a minute. You should do something different because Christ just changed your life. Something should change. You shouldn't just go back to the way it all was. But imagine if he had gone back to his spot and continued to beg, pretending he was blind. Be absolutely ridiculous. Yet so often as Christians, we say, I know that Christ loves me. I know that I have been forgiven. And yet nothing ever changes in our life. We do things the same way we always have because they're comfortable, they're familiar, they're what we know. Now what this man knew was begging. What he was used and comfortable to doing was being ignored and not being included in stuff. And all of a sudden, because of his encounter with Christ, he totally forgets about the mat. It sounds like he forgets about anything that he may have collected there prior to Jesus coming. And he follows Jesus the rest of the way. What a change. Christ's love changes us. See, when we have the opportunity to spend time with someone, we get to know them better. Now, I have spent time over the years with people that as I've gotten to know them better, I liked them less. You can agree, can't you? And I've also had the exact opposite experience, where as I have spent time with people, the more I liked them. The more I got to know them, the more I liked them. Even if we didn't agree on everything, there seemed to be this mutual connection where we could connect and grow and relate. And I think, at least I hope, that they liked me more. Now, I would be fooling myself and attempting to fool you if I told you that every person I've ever met and every person that spent time with me has liked me. I know that that's not true. You don't need to laugh that hard. You really don't. But the reality is when we spend time with Jesus, chances are we like him more. And it allows that personal relationship to continue to grow, to continue to just penetrate our life. And I love that how this man doesn't even walk away. He is so changed, he just stays right there with Jesus. Because I'm convinced it is impossible to really come face to face with Jesus and remain unchanged. I just don't see how that can happen. Because when we encounter someone, rarely do our feelings just stay the same. They increase or decrease a little. Based upon our actions, based upon our interactions, how we get along. Just like I said, when we spend time with somebody, we thought, wow, they really wanted to see me. Or you know what? They really didn't have time for me. Maybe I shouldn't bother them so much. Or I can't believe that they completely blew me off. Maybe it drops just a little bit. But as we spend time with Christ, I'm convinced that it just continues to go, continues to increase. That it's really impossible to come face to face with God, face to face with Christ, and remain unchanged. Does that make sense? I want you to think about that for just a moment. Because so often, we come to church week after week. We may pray. We may read our Bibles. And it doesn't feel like anything is changing. It doesn't seem like things are going anywhere. When that is the case, one of the best questions that we can begin to ask is why? What is going on here? God, am I just continuing to grow and I'm not seeing it? Or is there something between us? Because it's really not possible to just stay in the same moment. Stay in the same place. Even the crowd who was gathered around Jesus, who was making all of this noise, who was listening to whatever he was sharing, talking amongst themselves, saying the great things, when they saw this encounter, when they were blessed as bystanders of this encounter, with this personal encounter with Jesus and the blind man, they stopped what they were doing and began to praise. There are people in my life that have blessed me simply because they have spent time with God and I've been around them. Can you think about some people like that in your life? People that because they have been growing this personal relationship with Christ, when you spend time around them, you walk away saying, I want some of that. And the very flip side of it is I have been around people that I walk away saying, God, please don't let me get there. Please don't let me become like that. Christ's love really is contagious. The whole crowd caught it. In fact, it sounds like this man caught it at least for the moment, if not the hour or the day. My guess is a lifetime. Because he was known in the city. He was no stranger. Everybody knew the blind beggar that sat outside of Jericho. Because they were supporting him. They were his welfare system. They knew him. And all of a sudden, he's not there. He's walking around the streets he can see. What happened to you? Let me tell you what Jesus did. It changed him for life. So Christ's love reaches wide. Christ's love is personal, and Christ's love changes us. I'm convinced it is all three parts. The question is, what does it change us into? And that's what we're going to continue with here in the next few weeks. How does Christ's love change us? Where do we go from here? But I want you to hear something today. I want you to know that Christ is reaching for you. We often think that Christ is too busy, there's too many people in the world, how could that possibly be? And yet in the midst of that crowd, in the midst of all of that chaos, in the midst of all of the noise, he heard the man who was calling for him. Even when others told him to be quiet, he heard him. And he stopped. And he ministered right there in the middle of the street. Now, I've had lots of opportunities to talk to people about Jesus. You know what I do? I go to the side and sit down. We go, hey, let's go talk. Rarely do I stop right in the middle of the road and say, hey, let's have this conversation right here. But I want you to hear this, that Christ is reaching for you. That you are loved. You may not see or understand everything, but Christ's love is reaching for you. That he's not too busy. He's not too distracted. He's not too swayed by what others think about you, or even what you think about yourself. He's reaching for you. And I am convinced that just like he met with this man on the road, he wants to meet with you. He wants to take time and talk with you. An opportunity for you to come face to face. Not so that he can size you up, not so that he can give you the list of you've done this many things right and this many things wrong, but so that he can get to know you. And so that you can get to see that he loves you. Here's the deal. If you're willing to do it, and I mean really do it, no holds barred, screaming out for help, just like the man was screaming out for help on the side of the road, not the way we scream for help when we don't want anybody to hear us, it will change you forever. That's where I'm going to stop today. His love is wide, it is personal, and that changes us forever. Let's pray. Dear God, as we gather together today, as we read about Christ's love for this blind man who was often ignored, pretended that he was invisible, and just not treated well, that you had time for him. God, we are reminded that you have time for us, that you love us. And you don't want to just fix us. You don't want to just point a finger and take all the problems away. You actually want to develop a relationship with us. And so, God, I pray for each and every person here today that if they don't know you, that if they don't have that relationship with you, that if they think that for some reason you are uninterested in them, or don't hear them, or don't want, or whatever is in the way, that God, that those walls would come down today. That every person here would know that they are loved, that they matter, and that God, I just pray that our hearts would be changed forever, because we have come face to face with our Lord and Savior. God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time together. Amen. This morning, if you